the cloud. There we go. Okay, take it away, Chris. Or not.
Welcome. So this is the Asia Pacific US overlap. So due to the wonderful world of the international dateline, it is Tuesday morning and it should be about 8 a.m. in China, which makes it 8 p.m. US East Coast, 7 p.m. Central Time, and I think we're about 5 p.m. on the Pacific Coast. So we've got a good range of time zones on the go here. First off, thank you for our Chinese colleagues for getting up early for the morning, and thank you very much for our East Coast folks. Emily, thank you for the 8 to 9 p.m. meeting today, so it's good. Luckily, this only happens once every 6 weeks, but we do get to catch up. And I think the running order we agreed with Stephen initially when we did the kickoff was the very first thing would be to have a recap of the discussion from 2 weeks ago, which would have been EU, European, Asia Pacific overlap. So I don't know if there's Sin, if you would like to take over and give us just a recap of what was discussed in the last meeting to bring us up to speed.
Hello.
Oh,
Hello.
So I just studying. I'm not sure your question is for me.
yeah. Well, as co-chair for the
Yeah.
last meeting, could you give us a recap on what was discussed?
Sure. Um. Yeah. Sorry for take a moment to recall. I think we because it just was the first time meeting, and we had some introduction, and I think we talked about the board definition or hardware definition for embedded SIG. So actually there are some discussion about how to prioritize the hardware support, because some participants they are building product pretty much focused on some particular hardware models, but also another idea is that as a SIG, we want to define the most popular and the most representative hardware types for embedded SIG to pursue. So that's some discussion about the hardwares, and I think we had a whiteboard, and people kind of put a few names about their kind of recommendations. I assume it should be available in the last meeting minutes. Yeah, that's what I can recall now.
Do we have a link to that whiteboard anywhere? I don't think I saw it in the last meeting minutes. Is it there?
I went looking and I couldn't find it. I actually took a screenshot from YouTube, which not ideal, but so if anybody has it.
Okay. If there's no meeting minutes, that's our fault. And I remember Dominic pushed some notes into the GitHub, but I didn't review that, honestly.
There's definitely good notes on what was included in the whiteboard, but I can share right now so we can actually see what was on the whiteboard. Not as good as adding to the whiteboard, but let me do that real quick.
Yeah.
Pardon me as a Microsoft Teams user attempts to find the share screen button. Oh my gosh. Share, the very obvious button. Okay, here we go. So Zin, I don't know if you want to talk through some of the details of like who was prioritizing what, or like the different, what the different cores represent to different companies, for instance.
I don't think we already have a kind of a any decision for the prioritization yet. I think the X tensor ESP32 represents Sony, and the Cortex M4 should be proposed by Siemens, I think. And also the ARC is by Intel, Synopsys ARC. Yeah, there are kind of two X tensor kind of profiles, and the RISC 5 is something for common interest.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, okay, there are two priorities. Yeah.
I guess this is interesting. So there's not anything with an MMU on this list. There's nothing that can run from, at least what I'm seeing. I'm actually not super familiar with the ARC. There's nothing that could run, you know, like a traditional Linux distro, albeit, you know, not doing much else, but like, I don't even see anything Raspberry Pi class on this.
Yeah, I think these are just kind of first a few items from the month. Definitely we can add more.
Yeah. So we add the sum THUMB is ARM 16, and also the x86. I'm not
Yeah,
very sure.
yeah, definitely. We should add x86. So that's what we should do.
Yeah, thank you.
We can definitely get that on the list. Okay, so yeah, major holes. And maybe let me see if there's another preferred. Do folks have? Let me see if there's a whiteboard within Zoom. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Does anyone know if Zoom has a whiteboard? Sorry to be that meeting member.
No, I don't know. There is a question in the chat though. From Nick. It's like, why are there non-BA runtimes on the table?
It's a fair question. Yay.
I because it's a whiteboard. I even don't remember who put those names.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just gonna make a quick.
I guess it's probably fine because personally I think the most important for us is to solve problems. So very important is to define what the problem we have and what's the best way to go. Anyway, we are participating. Mostly want to solve some problem in our work and our company mission. So that should be fine in my mind. to have other runtime names.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important to compare what the runtimes within the bytecode alliance can do versus the ones outside.
Yeah.
It's important to get a sense of where all of the technology is at.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not like introducing dependencies on runtimes that we don't have any control over to anything that we are doing. Just that simple.
That's a good point.
So we are also using Raspberry Pi for certain projects. So AMD, I mean ARM64
Great.
running that, of course.
So let's get that on the list. Yes, I'll try to. Can you copy paste into a whiteboard? We'll just continue by adding sticky notes. Gosh. I'm assuming this is like a 4B or maybe, or roughly speaking.
Raspberry Pi, yeah.
Yeah. Someone had mentioned x86 as just, a target ISA. Does anyone have an example platform for that?
I think x86 is still very popular in the industrial usage,
Yeah.
but it depends on how we define embedded. Like current Intel, particularly the industrial kind of business, they're providing kind of a virtualized solution. That means they can have some like a Java running on some small VM and some like a Windows running on some bigger configuration VM. So I guess it's still, at the least for the Java part, it should be embedded, I think.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Do you have a platform name that we can Google and then categorize everything by like,
Yeah.
clock speed and available memory and stuff? It's like, is this in their PLC? Does Intel directly sell PLC? Like
Intel? No.
Okay, I didn't think so. So I guess
we sell the platform and some kind of software together with the platform. Actually, the software is not for sales; it's just kind of attached to the platform.
okay. What's the name of the platform generally?
So I remember they have some ECI, so edge control for industrial. Yeah.
Got it. Oops. Correct's in the way. Cool. We can get some more details on that later, because I am curious, like once we put this table together, obviously we've got the different dimensions of, ISA, operating system, then you start looking at the hardware availability. I'm curious what the range will end up being. Okay, so we filled our two gaps. Does anyone else have platforms that they'd like to put on the list? And we can kind of talk through what dimensions they add from. I realize we've.
I mean, operating systems, I think, are relevant as part of platform,
Yes.
right? So besides Linux, obviously, we have a bunch of RTOSes, So we use one called NutX, NUTTX. And some other team in Sony is using RT thread.
Our T thread is good to know. I believe NetX was on that last list. Realize I'm not showing it right now.
Yep.
Cool.
I think from our point of view, all right, we have our own internal proprietary stuff, which not relevant for this discussion, but I would put in Zephyr, which is on the last slide, and FreeRTOS are the two big ones that we'd also look at. And then we do use, there is 32-bit ARM Linux and 64-bit ARM Linux being used.
That's a good point. Pile the RTOSes together.
I think Zephyr was on the last slide as well.
Yeah, I'll do a little filtering.
FreeRTOS.
I guess that is one thing. You brought up the proprietary operating systems. Is there anything, does anyone have thoughts on an open source basically making sure that we are testing things that can eventually be fed back into a product so they make it into real life. Just like, is, for instance, FreeRTOS a close enough approximation to the proprietary RTOSes you're testing on that conclusions made there would be able to feed back to internal products? Same goes for Linux, same goes for some of the beefier RTOSes like Zephyr.
I think I'm pretty fine with the open source stuff. Actually, I think that would be good. I mean, we've seen Siemens embedded software, the Augmentor graphics team has started to focus more on the open source stuff. So I think it would be good to focus on that. And one of the things we discussed originally was making sure that the platforms that we selected as the lowest common denominators would be ones that are kind of freely available for everybody to get involved with. So we're making sure that we can all use it. So I think I'm happy to say let's just stick with an open source variant and select some that have a feature set that matches what we want, and that would be good.
Cool.
Just because I want to make sure that everybody can get involved and use the target platforms for development and testing. Yeah, I think it was one of the things that came up was like, can we make sure that the hardware that we pick and the software that we pick are easily shareable?
Yeah, agreed. I guess my question is just like the exercise, thinking through, the things we test have to be freely available. It's just thinking back to the product lines that you're getting bugged about and making sure that there's something representative on here so that you can later convince somebody to continue, supporting this sort of thread, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to be a little bit more specific, I would go Linux 32 and 64-bit with the real-time kernel patches applied to it. So
very good point.
and then we look at that on both x86 and on ARM.
Hi, for platform, I think we also so we also support the Windows and ESP IDF platforms. Because I think ESP IDF is also very popular, right? And in one more community, there are some other developers. They are using the Windows platform. I remember that Amazon they also support the Windows platform. They develop some features or abstract the WASI APIs in the Windows for the Windows. So I think Windows is also a platform to support.
I can put it on the list. It's like, I think
Okay.
we need to talk about it. And I think, you know, that is one of those things that like, there's a subset of folks who need numbers out of Windows than you need numbers out of Windows. It's just definitely less open than Linux.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, I think the question is, do you want to put Windows as in the category of embedded?
For Windows, the developer tool chain can be or IDE can be the MS Visual Studio, right? But some developer also use the I remember my sheets or something like that. They don't use the MSVC Visual Studio IDE. They use some other tool chain to compare one more in Windows. Yeah, that seems to be something like embedded tool chain.
That's a good point, actually. We're thinking, I think, initially about the target platforms we want to support, but it's also important to start thinking about the developer experience, the IDE, the tool chain, what that looks like, particularly because we're going to run into how do you do debugging? What's it look like? Can you do on-device debugging? And the developer experience kicks in after that. So I would put Windows, Linux as development environments, and then particularly for WAMA, how do you do target debugging? How would you emulate the device that you're trying to execute on? What's that development experience like? What's the tool chain like? Can you cross compile for it? All those questions are going to come up. AOT, WAMA RC, that sort of stuff.
I'm gonna start making a just a list of further concerns over here.
Yeah.
I think some of them will feed directly into the white paper because your point on debugging is huge, particularly for embedded devices.
Yeah, it's one of the big questions we have internally at the moment.
Okay. Any more platforms?
Another platform is ESP IDF.
Right.
Uh,
Yep.
That's
I totally forgot to get that one in there.
ESP was already noted in last meeting, I think.
Okay. I'll go through and scrub for repeats. I guess real quick, I'm not super familiar with the whole ESP line. I've obviously come across some of them. Is the IDF the same as the Extensa? Are these all
ESP IDF is the software, the OS, and it's actually free RTOS plus some stuff.
cool? So that's thank you. Here. Okay. Okay. More platforms? Going once? Twice? Cool. I think we can after the meeting, I can merge this in with the table from the last meeting. We actually did, so we didn't talk about any more about WASM runtimes that we wanted to test. I don't necessarily, I don't want to keep opening up cans of worms, but I want to make sure we have the perspective from the US that was already discussed between Asia and Europe. The current list of runtimes the embedded SIG is interested in are WAMR first and foremost, but then a couple of others, so WAS0 and WASM3. Anyone have any other thoughts on things to consider or on thoughts why not to consider, for instance, WASM3 and WAS0? I wouldn't support anyone saying we shouldn't consider WAMR. That would be silly.
I'd like to, reiterate my point from earlier that like we shouldn't add blockers on non-BA runtimes. So, considering them is fine. I have no problem with that. But like, I think it'd be a problem if like we don't want to move something forward because it's not in, WAS0 yet, but like we have no control over what things WAS0 implements. So that's just kind of like something that would set us up for failure. And second point, I would like to add WASM time to that list. At the moment, WASM time is not targeting, a lot of these targets, but we have plans to add an interpreter so that you can bring WASM time anywhere, and it should allow targeting all this stuff. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. Given that our idea of embedded is fairly broad, WASM time definitely can fit in certain things, and it's much closer to the spec, the bleeding edge of the spec, right? So in that sense, it's helpful.
Awesome. All right. Any other thoughts on WASM runtimes? Cool. So this is good. We'll merge this with, actually, I'm gonna just be a little paranoid and screenshot this whiteboard. I'm sure it's hidden somewhere, but in the event that it's hard to find, we'll have it saved. Chris, do you have stuff on your agenda? Otherwise I can peek at mine.
This was a big one. I think we need an action item to try and turn the whiteboard into a first draft of a white paper. So that's probably something for somebody in the US to do.
Sounds good.
I can help with that. It's the not so much fun job. I think once we get it written down, it'll be easier to drive the conversation forward, right? First draft, let's have a go at it. So I can do that. It shouldn't take too long, be a page or two just to get it started, and then we can start filling in the details. I'm sure questions will come on MMU, not MMU, particularly, and other hardware features too. So RAM in particular, footprint. Let's do that. But let's write it down. Once we've got it written down, it goes from a whiteboard to something that looks easier to dispute and complain about, which is good.
So where are we keeping this stuff? Are we going to use the wiki on the or just put it in GitHub? What's
Good question. Let's put it on GitHub somewhere.
yeah.
I'll do it as a markdown on GitHub. We have a repository that a Sig Embedded repository that was set up for us by Bailey. She set it up so we can use that.
Real quick, so we have an entirely separate Sig Embedded repository. I should know the answer to this question, but I've been in the meetings. Okay, cool. I'll go hunting for the Sig Embed. I've been under the meetings and then Sig Embedded directory under that, not the full repository.
Yeah, I'll send out a link. I'll do the mailing list as well.
I bet you already did, but
I might have growing pains. I'll do it anyway.
oh, there it is.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay, so that actually reminds me of one thing that just looks like is kind of a hanging to do / may not happen, and maybe we should talk about real quick, is that based on what I'm seeing on Zulip, it doesn't look like stuff is being transferred from the WIP embedded discussion, the work in progress embedded SIG discussion, to the embedded SIG, because they have different visibility on the internet. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not fair to have people to just take comments that people made in what was an internal, a somewhat internal forum and put it somewhere that it's widely searchable. Appears to be like kind of right now what's putting a break on the brakes on that. And I think, you know, we can't change privacy rules out from under people, but I wanted to open that up as something just to talk through. Sounds like there's no major objections to that. Does anyone know, and this was not something I could not necessarily find the answer to, if at some point, and I'm comparing Zulip to Slack, basically if at some point the comments from the WIP embedded channel will end up getting, you know, trashed at some point, or will those always be available to search?
I think they will always be available. I think we might be able to like archive the old stream, but I'm not totally sure. I would need to like look into it.
Okay.
Like archive in that like we can make it read only so that people don't accidentally kind of try and revive dead threads in places where, you know, not everyone else can see them, kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, I think last time we talked about move the previous discussion to the embedded SIG. Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure. Maybe we can do that or not.
Yeah, based on the discussion on Zulip, moving them would basically change the privacy settings. That's not fair. So
Uh, do you mean the discussion in the embedded WIP channel?
yeah, because
Um,
that is not searchable from the wider web, and
yeah,
the Sig embedded channel is.
if we get agreement from all the kind of people, then we can move. Right. So in the WIP channel, so ask all the participants whether or not we can move it to the open channel. And also, I'm not sure technically is it possible to move topics from one channel to another channel from Zulip.
It is technically possible, but I don't know. I mean, it seems like whether we want to invest the time and effort in tracking down everyone who's left a comment in the whip stream and like made sure they're okay with this. I don't know if that's the best use of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm with Nick on this one. But if we can archive them, we'll have access to them. So those conversations can continue.
Yeah, I think we should post a message there or in a channel just to let them know that it's happening. We're gonna archive it and move the conversation over. Has that happened already? I might have missed it.
It has happened, yeah.
Oh, great. Then we're good to go. The only other thing I can think of doing is I think it's mainly the guys in University Against that were doing a lot of discussion there. I think we can drop them a mail and let them know. It'd be a big deal. Over communicate a little bit.
All right. Then I think that was pretty much all I had from I was looking at the to-dos from last time, and that looked like the one that we should bring up. We've got about 15 minutes here. Do we want to move on to discussing perhaps like potential sections for the white paper?
Outline structure for it. Sure, we can do.
Or is that if people feel like that's jumping the gun, you know?
We set up the SIG and we said let's before we get onto the really interesting stuff, all the innovation, all the supporting tool chains and all the rest of it, we said let's get this white paper out the way so that we've a common platform or target set that everybody knows we're trying to address. Because certainly some of the feedback we got in setting up the charter that came from the TSC was it was so hard to evaluate what we were doing because we don't explicitly state that target set. So I know it's kind of a blocker to the more interesting discussions, but it's deliberately a blocker to the more interesting discussions so we can get it out of the way. So I'm happy to jump in and let's just have a crack at it and get a first draft done, and it will be horrible and people will complain, but it drives the conversation and we can get it done and out of the way so we can move on to the much more interesting discussion. but it gives us all this common baseline of what's in scope. And more importantly, I think also understanding what's not in scope from an embedded point of view. Things that we don't want to consider or would say, hey, this isn't an embedded, this isn't specific to the embedded space and will be solved by other activities. That's equally as important.
Agreed. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm hunting for the there was a document that defined what would go in the white paper, and I was gonna bring that up so the folks could just see it. And I had the link, and the link is now gone.
I just dropped it in chat, Emily. It's in the proposal for the SIG from the
Ideal.
governance repo. So the link to it, to that section of the proposal is in chat.
Perfect. Okay, let me just share that real quick. Awesome. So we've got the technical scope white paper. With, yeah, this is the doc, I guess. So my question was, this is a little bit, you know, kind of like probing at the vision of the white paper. Is it just, what exactly is scope? And I know we've said this before, but it's hardware, software, like applications. How do we slice this?
I think when we originally went through it, the conversation was essentially what's the lowest common denominator of a platform? And we started to have that discussion ourselves, and it was also being driven by the TSC, because it's like, well, what you're really trying to target here. And it's so easy to get so confused with so many different platforms. So what there was also this discussion of it's at some point you get to, I mean, we've done the research, you get to the point where you do WebAssembly, but you could do WASM to C, and you don't have a runtime, and you have a very small form factor device. Is that still in scope, or are we just going to focus on the stuff that actually has a runtime environment on it? So where's that cutoff line between stuff that's WebAssembly focused and stuff that's like, well, it could be, as long as you've got a C compiler, you can compile for it, and it's a tool chain adaptation, but it's not really WebAssembly anymore. It's native C that you're running on the device. So do we just consider things that run a bytecode payload of some sort, or do we want to consider really small form factor devices? So that was the discussion we got to. And also in preparation for setting up the SIG, Ralph had the same feedback where he was saying, you know, I think in his terms, he referred to it as there being a point in which it's like a watershed point where it's no longer really WebAssembly, or no longer really component model or WASI driven. Beyond here is just something that's a bit too small to do anything with it. So there's like a cutoff point. And that's really what we were trying to define initially, but then also to define bits that are SIG embedded specific and bits that are not SIG embedded specific, that would be addressed by other SIGs or parts of the industry or other parts of the standardization process that we don't actually need to worry about. So where would we add value from an embedded point of view that nobody else is really, I think, the scope. So
Makes sense. Mm.
and I mean, I don't know. I think this is one where we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, but there is a point comes we have to take some practical steps to make sure that it's not so wide that it's impossible to make sense of where you're going. So for instance, the WASM to C stuff, I think it's really interesting. But is it something that we should focus on in the embedded SIG? I'm happy not to.
I would say no. You know,
and this is where, you know, I think this is why I'm itching to do like a first draft, because I'll write these things and people can argue over it. But yeah, I'm happy not to do that. Say, look, WASM to C, bit too low level. We want some sort of runtime environment in there. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think like the potential for kind of like everybody to win here is with unified interfaces that we all get to reuse, and that makes everybody's life easier. And if you're at WASM to see, your definition of an interface is starting to get blurry. So
Yes.
I think that's a pretty clear point to just call it.
Right. Right. And it would also be really interesting to see and learn a little bit more about the WASM time roadmap for the embedded platform. I know Nick's mentioned it here, but I also know Till was excited about working on some of it as well. But I don't know exactly what that roadmap looks like, apart from what was shared.
I can speak to it a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily written down all together in one place. So already WASM time supports you know, like WASM time will run on Zephyr, for example. You just need to provide you know, like implement a header file essentially for dealing with how memories are handled. And then as far as the interpreter goes, but that means you are required to run on a architecture that is supported by CraneLift, our compiler. So that is currently means 64-bit targets, and you know, there's only 4 that are supported right now. To kind of lift that restriction and take WASM time everywhere, we have plans to add an interpreter that's portable and can run anywhere. And of course, you know, that means you're not going to get the same performance that you would from a compiler. But you know, that's sort of the trade-off. And if you really care about, you know, performance, then you can contribute a compiler backend. But this will get you going at least.
Sounds good.
And then I guess the other missing piece, which I can give an update on, is the custom page sizes proposal, so that you can define small linear memories for WASM in standards-based ways. Yeah, which is scheduled for a phase 2 vote in the, I think, July 30th CG meeting. So yeah, hopefully make some good progress there, and yeah, could start standardizing this stuff.
That was the announcement that I meant to make at the beginning. Just of like, so we're going down the format we're trying to stick to. It's like announcement was, check out the July 30th meeting. Interesting. So actually, real quick, do you have a sense of how much memory you think WASM time will compile down to? Are we talking, I assume we're still talking bytes? I know there's tricks to play to like strip rust down.
The binary size of the executable.
Yeah.
So it really depends what features you enable, right? There's a ton of different features you can turn on and off for WASM time. And then this is also something that hasn't been invested in a ton yet, right? So it's something that we can improve if there's people who want to use WASM time, but need better code sizes. But I believe we got down to, it was like less than a megabyte, I think. And I think most of the, or like a lot of the binary was error messages. Like we try to have nice error messages for all the stuff. And so I could imagine,
Yeah.
you know, some sort of feature where instead we have error codes, and then you can kind of symbolicate them on the other side. But you know, again, that's the kind of thing we're not going to like just go do for the idea that someone might sometime find it useful. That's the kind of thing that, like, if you want to use WASM time and that's an issue, then talk to us and we can, you know, address it at that point.
Totally. It's just good to know there's potential easy wins out there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we are coming up on the last 5 minutes of this meeting. Does anyone want to throw out any very last agenda items before we kind of do a wrap up and make sure that all of the action items are handed off? All right. I will take the silence as a no. So for action items, I've got down here, Chris has volunteered to do a transfer of the whiteboard in a combination with the other one into something that's easier to argue about. Beyond that, I'm actually not seeing a ton of additional action items right now.
Send out the embedded Sig repo to the mailing list as a reminder. And I can do that when I do the first document, that's no problem. Then the other common to do items is YouTube video uploading, and I'll do the meeting notes.
Sounds good. All right. I'm trying to think if there's anything we could ask folks broadly to come with next time to just jumpstart conversation on the white paper. Just because we've all laid out the hardware that we think should be addressed. Just, you know, if everybody wanted to come with a 1-sentence argument for why their piece of hardware should be the standard bearer, I don't know, that's a potential place to start.
Well, I think one of the topics that got picked up, which I thought was a really good suggestion, I can't remember who made it, was not only the hardware form factor, but give me a development board that you can pick up that is that device. So is it an STM32 something or an ESP32 something, and it's this board, and here's a couple of links to supply it to the model, and you can pick it up. That would be really good, I think. So it's turning those hardware limitations into development kits that we can point folks to. So you want to go target it, buy this one, that would work. So I think things like that would be really good.
Awesome. Then we have homework.
You do have homework. Maybe that's something we can put in a call and a mail to everybody as well.
Regarding to the white paper, do you want to list some kind of interesting requirement for the embedded?
You mean
So yeah, we see we already have a few items defined for the white paper scope, but I don't see whether or not we want to put the current common interesting questions or requirements we want to address, or we want to go deeper.
so you mean just adding bullet points to that technical white paper? And
Yeah,
flesh
I
out
guess
our
it's
exact
too early to provide any conclusion, but I think as a starting point, maybe we can collect all the problems we want to address in this SIG.
Agree. And I think that could go out as part of the call for saying, you know,
Yeah.
show up with a board, show up with some problems. That that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. On that point, I don't know. I know we're at time, but quick question, because we've got Nick on and we have Zin on. Is there any now that Wasm Time's starting to focus on some of the embedded platforms, is there an exchange of roadmaps between the WAMA team and the Wasm Time team yet? Is there a forum for that at all? Could that be something that we should be doing here too?
Yeah. Well, I think we haven't done that so far, but probably this is a good place for us to share.
Yeah, always happy to share and exchange ideas. For what it's worth, we did publish, I think like at the end of November last year, kind of a retrospective on what we did last year, and then sort of some of the stuff that we were thinking about doing for this year, you know, kind of depending on, you know, resources and interest and stuff. So that's sort of our roadmap to the degree it exists. If people are interested in that, I can grab a link and throw it in the Zoom chat.
That'd be awesome, actually. And I know, talking to Zin and Wenyoung, you can correct me, but talking to Thomas this morning, he was saying that the conversations just started on some of the WAMA roadmap stuff too. So it'd be a great opportunity to go through that. Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
All right. Then I think we'll call it for this meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That's great.
We'll have the notes up and we'll have the recording of this, so you all can point people to it. If any of your colleagues didn't get to attend, they can catch up.
Well, I hope folks in China have a fantastic day. To my colleagues in the US, have a great evening. Thank you so much for staying late.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.